Isaiah was overwhelmed. Isaiah was overwhelmed, and I wonder if you and I can relate. I want you to take a trip in your mind's eye this morning, in the spaces of your memory, to remember a place that made your jaw drop, that made you feel an absolute sense of wonder and awe, that made you feel very small in its vastness, that amazed you and stunned you with its beauty. That place will probably be different for each one of us. The Grand Canyon, the Lincoln Memorial, Yellowstone National Park, the top of the John Hancock Building in Chicago, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, Carnegie Hall, walking along the shore of the Pacific Ocean, lying in a country field on a cloudless, moonless summer night with the heavens sparkling overhead. I need you to think of that place. I need you to remember how you felt in that majestic, inspiring, and frightening place. And once you've understood that feeling, you begin to understand why Isaiah was overwhelmed. Because if you add up all the beauty, all the inspiration, all the reverence, all the wonder and fear that each one of us felt in the place we just remembered, if we add all of that up into one enormous surge of feeling, that's at least a portion of what Isaiah felt. Because the place he found himself in was the ultimate place, the throne room of the Creator of the universe, the temple of heaven. Isaiah was overwhelmed. Here are the second and third definitions of the word overwhelmed from Webster's Unabridged College Dictionary. 2, to be overcome completely in mind or feeling, as in overcome by remorse. Or 3, to be laden, heaped, treated, or addressed with an overpowering or excessive amount of anything. A child overwhelmed with presents, to overwhelm someone with questions. That was Isaiah. He was overwhelmed. How big was that place in which Isaiah found himself? There was no roof, no upward limit to its vastness. He saw seraphim, flying angels in attendance upon God. And how big was God in his vision? Isaiah tells us that the hem of God's robe filled the entire temple. Just the hem of the robe. Can you imagine that enormity? And there was thunder. We're told that the whole structure shook at the sound of the angels' voices. Smoke filled the temple. Isaiah was overwhelmed. Remember his first reaction to being so overwhelmed? I'm not worthy to see this. And if I'm not dead yet, I should be soon, Isaiah thought. He felt unclean, unworthy, too small, too mortal to be seeing something so huge, so immortal. Isaiah was overwhelmed, and I wonder if we can relate. And I wonder if we can relate right now, not so much because of that second or third definition of overwhelmed. Here's the first definition of overwhelmed from Webster's. To be overpowered, especially by superior forces. Roman troops were overwhelmed by barbarians. No, let's not go there this morning. Let's go to the fourth definition. To be covered or buried underneath a mass of something, as floodwaters or debris or avalanche. Lava from erupting Vesuvius overwhelmed the city of Pompeii. Yeah, that's how I've felt. Buried. Buried beneath worry, beneath shame, beneath fear or anger, confusion, doubt, overwhelmed. Maybe you felt that way too. Woe is me. I am a person of unclean lips and come from a people of unclean lips. But then in his vision, something incredible happens to Isaiah. One of the heavenly angels comes and takes Isaiah's guilt and shame and sin away. He takes all his smallness and unworthiness away. He just burns it right out of him. And that's not where Isaiah's vision ends. For then the most incredible thing of all happens. God speaks. Now, Here's a more advanced exercise in imagination for you. What does the voice of God sound like? What do you think? What sound comes to your oral memory? Let's start with the most frequently used metaphor for God's voice. God sounds like a mighty thunderstorm with rolling sheets of rain and the startling crack of thunder. Or how about this? You're sitting in the middle of a forest on a summer day and a breeze comes, and with it comes the sound of a million rustling leaves. An ocean of leaves that gently sounds in wave upon wave upon wave. Or this, you're sitting by the fire station on a warm and quiet noonday, eating a sack lunch, when suddenly the civil defense siren goes off. And the sound is so large, it no longer seems to come from over there or over there. It seems to be lodged squarely in your brain. You are woke. Or this, you're laying in bed on a lazy weekend morning, not really sleeping anymore, just dozing, because you don't want to break the spirit of the morning and get up. Then at the very edge of your hearing, there is a sound, a quiet music, with sounds shaped almost into words, but not quite. You concentrate. You try to focus on that sound. Where is it coming from? Who's making it? What is it saying? In your mind, as you listen, you follow that sound out of your room, down the hall, and through a half-open door to the sound's author, your baby. She's just discovered her voice and is trying it out. The music and delight in that voice bring wonder to your heart and tears to your eyes. Maybe you thought of something else that sounded like the voice of God, a friend's whisper, a favorite piece of music, your mother saying your name. Well, let's collect these all together. Let's sound them off at once, all together, and say that's what it might have sounded like for Isaiah. Something fearful and calming, something alarming and wonderful. This is the sound of God's voice asking, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" Now, here's my real question for you this morning, for all of us. If you were in that place, in that incredible, awe-inspiring place, and you heard that voice, that rainbow of sounds voice, what would you have said in response? What would you say in response? I think I might have been too overwhelmed to say anything. Is that how you might have felt too? Well, you know what Isaiah said. "Here am I, send me." And I find that amazing. And I don't think that it's amazing because Isaiah was courageous or overcame his fear or audacious or suddenly brave. I think he just spoke from the heart. I think he felt so forgiven, so much a part of God's people and purpose that he no longer thought about how little he was in such an immense place. He didn't think about the scrawniness of his own voice in the presence of the voice of God. He didn't feel buried. He didn't feel powerless. He didn't feel ashamed or afraid. Isaiah, completely unselfconsciously, simply responded to the call of God. "I'll do it. I'll do your work, God. Send me." Do you ever get overwhelmed? Do you ever think, "I can't do it. I'm not going to make it. I'm not strong enough. I'm not brave enough. I'm not gutsy enough. I'm not stupid enough. I don't have enough power, enough money, enough smarts, enough gall"? Do you ever think that, particularly right now, when the world most needs you to be woke up, Most needs you to speak out. Most needs you to witness to the loving power and light of God's grace. It's okay if you do. We all get overwhelmed. Even the prophet Isaiah got overwhelmed, but then through the seraph, through the angel, through the wondrous divine voice, God took all that overwhelmed stuff away. And Isaiah was ready to do what needed to be done, whether he thought he could do it or not. Here am I. Send me. What about you? Are you ready to stop being overwhelmed yet? Are you ready to start following God's call wherever it leads you, whenever it calls you, whoever it sends you to? Dan Bagley writes about an experience that you and I can relate to. He was sitting by himself on a plane about to take off from Seattle going to Dallas. So far, nobody had sat next to him in the seat. You know how that is. You kind of sit there waiting and hoping that nobody will sit next to you. This is what happened next. The last to board the plane were a woman and 3 children. Oh, please don't sit next to me, I thought. I've got so much work to do on this flight. But a moment later, an 11-year-old girl and a 9-year-old brother were climbing over me, while the woman and a 4-year-old boy sat behind. Almost immediately, the older children started bickering, while the child behind me intermittently kicked the back of my seat over and over again. Every few moments, the boy would ask his sister, "Where are we now?" "Shut up," she'd snap back, and a new round of squirming and whining would ensue. Kids have no concept of important work, I thought, quietly resenting my predicament. Then in my mind, a voice as clear as a song simply said, "Love them." I countered to myself, "I've got important work to do, and these kids are brats." The voice simply responded, "Love them," as if they were your children. Having heard the "where are we now" question repeatedly, I turned to the in-flight magazine map. In spite of my important work, I explained to the kids our flight path, dividing it into quarter-hour flight increments, and estimated when we would land in Dallas. Soon these kids were telling me that they had taken this trip to Seattle to see their father who was in the hospital, and now they were going home. As they talked, they asked me about flying, navigation, science, grown-ups' views about life. The time passed quickly, and my important work was left undone. And as we were preparing to land, I asked how their father was doing now. They grew quiet, and the boy simply said, "He died." "Oh, I'm so sorry." "Yeah, me too," the little girl said, "but it's my little brother that I'm most worried about. He's taking it real hard." I suddenly realized that what we'd been talking about was the most important work we ever face. Living, loving, and growing in spite of heartbreak. When we said goodbye in Dallas, the boy shook my hand and thanked me for being his online teacher. And I thanked him for being mine. There's work to be done. God calls us to do that work. God's call sometimes comes to us in intimidating places, big, lofty, imposing places, the streets of the city, the granite buildings of decision makers, the halls of power. More often, God's call comes to us in the everyday places of our lives, in the living room, in the schoolroom, the boardroom, the assembly line, on the sidewalk, in the restaurant, at work, or at home. The question is, will we follow that call? When God calls you, will you stop being so overwhelmed? Will you respond with the spirit, if not the words of Isaiah? "Here am I. Send me."